So these notes will be on rotations. First of all, we're going to talk about what is a rotation. What is another word you can use for it? I want you to take a second to think about it. So to rotate a shape means to turn, or you could think of it as spin a shape. So hopefully you were thinking somewhat along those lines. So that's going to be our definition of rotation. It's going to be nice and simple. Just to rotate means to turn. Now, direction of rotation is very important. We've talked about this before. So we have clockwise and we have counterclockwise. So clockwise is this way, and it's the same direction that a clock goes. If you look at a clock, it goes 12, 1, 2, 3. So that's where we get clockwise from. So if counter means opposite, then what does counterclockwise mean? Counterclockwise would mean the opposite direction. So we would go backwards on the clock. So 12, 11, 10. Okay? If you're copying down these notes and didn't get all of them, then I'd like you to pause the video and then press play when you are ready to move on. Alright, so if we have a graph and we are rotating a shape on our graph. Let me try that one again. Okay, so we're rotating a shape on our graph 90 degrees. And we'll go clockwise. So let's say we're starting here. And we've got A, B, C. 90 degrees clockwise means we follow the direction of a clock and go this way. And it means we're going to turn our shape a quarter of the way, right? You guys know from the game we've played that it means that you go once. You go into the next quadrant. So we have A at point 1, 2. We have B at point 2, 4. And we have C at point 2, 2. When we rotate this 90 degrees, it's the same thing as if you took this entire graph and you turned it a quarter turn to the right. So that would end up with A being, let's do a different color. So A being here, C would be here, and then B would be here. Okay, that would be if I took it and just took this triangle and turned it 90 degrees. So let's talk about our new points. So our new A is at 2, 1. The new B is at 4, 2. And the new C is at 2, negative 2. Oh, you know what? I forgot my negatives. So it's at 2, negative 1, and 2. So 4, negative 2. Okay, so take a second, and you may have noticed as I was doing this, take a second to think about what the pattern is, because there is a pattern that we can come up with so that we don't even have to use the graph every time. So look at what happens in the points A after we do 90 degrees clockwise. The X and Y values, so we started with X and Y, switched places. So now the number that was in our Y spot is now first, and the number that it was in our X spot is now second. And what else happened? the x became the opposite. In this case, they were all positive to begin with, and they're all negative now. If they had started as being negative, they would now be positive. So you can think of that negative sign as being an opposite sign. Okay, so all of our rotations, we're not going to do charts for, or, examples for all of them, but we can come up with a chart. So rotate 90 degrees. That tells us what happens to all of the points when you do different rotations. So we found that when you rotate 90 degrees, and it's up to you, if you want to get some of those twistable crayons that are in the back, or if you have different color markers or pens with you that you could color code this too, you can go right ahead and do that. So it's going to go from X, Y, and we said that it's going to end up being the Y, the number that was in the Y value is first, and then it's going to be X second, and it's going to be the opposite. So anytime you rotate something 90 degrees, that is what will happen. Clockwise, actually, we need to make a note of that. Okay, so now we'll do counterclockwise. Okay, so when we go counterclockwise, let's just set this up. When we go counterclockwise, we of course start with our X first, and then our Y, and then that ends up being the opposite of Y is first, and then our X value comes second. Okay, that's just where the numbers are going. In every single case, X is first and Y is second, but we're just showing that the value of the point, so let's say that X was 2 originally and Y was 3, then once you rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, your point will be -3, 2. So that's all that's saying. It's not saying that we are ever changing and that we plot the Y value first. We're just saying that the values that they have switch. Okay, if we rotate 180 degrees either direction, because 180 degrees just goes to that opposite quadrant, so it doesn't matter which direction you go. So 180 degrees either direction. And we start with our X value and our Y value. You will end up with the opposite of your X value first, and then the opposite of your Y value second. So basically, if your numbers were positive, they're now negative. If they were negative, they're now positive. And if you had one of each, then the negatives will be in the other place, and the positives will be in the other place. So 180 degrees, they stay in the same place, they just switch their signs. Alright, so we have 2 left. To rotate 270 degrees, let me write that better. 270 degrees clockwise. And we have our X value and our Y value. You end up with -Y first, so what was in your Y value becomes your X value, and it's the opposite of, and then your X value is what comes second. And if you notice, that should seem a little familiar. If you look up at the top, well, the second one, rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise, we have the same exact rule. And that makes sense because rotating 90 degrees counterclockwise, one space, so if we go one space to the left, we end in the same place as if we went 3 places to the right, which is rotating 270 degrees clockwise. Alright, and we have one more left. Rotate 270 degrees counterclockwise. Okay, so the last one that we are doing is rotate 270 degrees counterclockwise. So if we start with our x and y value, then after the rotation, we have our y value is in the first spot and our x value is in the second spot, and it is the opposite sign from what it was. So if the x was negative, it's now positive. If it was positive, it's now negative. If you look up, this is the same as clockwise 90 degrees, and that makes sense because if you go to the right 90 degrees or the right one quadrant on a graph, you would end up in the same place as if you went to the left counterclockwise 3 places on your graph. Okay, so that's all we're going to do for rotation notes today. The expectation is that you are able to answer questions about these rules if you have an open notes assessment, and that you are able to answer any questions about that first example that we did on the graph. So it's up to you if you took notes on this or not, but the expectation is that you are able to answer questions about these things. So if you need to rewind, pause, watch it again, whatever you need to do, you should have time now to go and do that. And if you don't have much time left in class, then you can always do it in study or at home.